here we have two almost identical snare drums. This is a 14 by 5, this is a 14 by 6. But can you guess which one of these is the PDP concept snare drum and which one of these is actually a DW Performance Series snare drum? And yes, I did say that correct. One of these two is actually a DW, not a PDP. Stay around, let's find out which one's which and what's the difference between them. What's going on, guys? Zach here. If this is your first time to my channel, thank you, welcome. If you've been to my channel before, I appreciate you coming back. So here we are, we're in the drum room today. I'm not going to be doing a drum cover, I'm not doing any DIYs, but I'm going to be dropping some knowledge on you. I was on the forums the other day and there was a ridiculous amount of heat and bad information. Somebody posted a snare drum, it looked just like this, and they said, hey, what is my DW worth? I couldn't believe how many people were just quick to say, hey man, sorry bro, but you got screwed. Somebody just slapped a DW badge on there, but really it's a PDP, it ain't worth nothing, so might as well just keep it. Guess what? That's not true. Here we have a 14 by 6 DW Performance Series snare drum. Here I have a 14 by 5 PDP Concept Series snare drum. This is what influenced that. These are both in natural maple with a high gloss finish, but there are some subtle differences between them. This has been verified by DW for those who are watching and still not believe me. And if you want to see my emails and conversations, I will be glad to send them to you. Just let me know where I'm sending it. This is also not the first time that a DW has influenced a PDP. If you can recall a long time ago, DW released a drum set and it was just called the Drum Workshop Series. It had oval lugs just like my PDP X7. Okay? That drum set is what influenced PDP to switch from their current lugs to the oval lugs at the time, because that drum set came out before the X7. This snare drum came out before the Concept Series. This is the this is the DW Performance Series, and this is actually pretty rare. It was very limited and came out for a short time with these lugs, but then DW passed them off to PDP and they released the Concept Series using the same lugs. They just changed out a bunch of other parts. What we have, some of the differences are going to be obviously in the badging. Great, yes. This one is a DW badge, a PDP badge. But even between the lugs, there are some differences in the lugs. There's differences between the washers in the tension rods. There's differences in the butt plate, there's differences in the hardware, and there's differences on the finishes on the inside as well. So I'm going to go ahead, we're going to talk about some of the differences, and I'm going to show you all the differences. So here we go, PDP, DW, no wait, DW, PDP. That's right, let's take a look.
Let's dive into some of the differences. So here I've moved the snare drums around. You can see this one has the standard PDP concept badge. Now, the PDP badge did change just this last year, so now it no longer says DW at all, but this PDP badge is the original that says PDP Concept Maple DW. This snare drum actually has not one, but two badges referencing that it is a DW performance snare drum. You'll see one of the badges is just a generic DW performance badge, where the other badge over here actually has the serial number written into the badge itself. So the badges are definitely different. Yes, they are the same size, they are the same concepts, but this is the PDP concept, the DW. So let's look at some of the other things. Like for instance, the lugs. They have the exact same lugs, but the sleeves that hold the tension rods are different. Here they have a brass lug, but over here on the DW, it is chrome. So, you know, it just looks nicer. It looks more finished on the DW because the connectors for the tension rods are actually in chrome for the DW, and here it is an unfinished, just brass sleeve. So that's a big difference there. It just looks more complete for the DW than it does the PDP. Another little subtle difference is on the actual tension rods themselves. They just use metal washers throughout the PDP, and on the DW, you'll see that they use a black nylon washer throughout top and bottom. And that makes a big difference too, because that's less metal on metal contact between the tension rod and the hoop itself. So those are a couple little differences there. And if we keep going, we'll look at things like the butt plate. So if I turn this around, there's your butt plate there. There's your butt plate there. The PDP just has a generic PDP butt plate. The DW has the pre-butt plate to the new 3-point that people like, but this was the standard DW butt plate at the time. They are both, though, rocking the same DW mag throw-off, which I absolutely love. I think it's one of the greatest throw-offs ever, and even in some of the snare drums that I've put together, I use the exact same snare throw-off. So between that, those are some of the outer differences. I think the vent holes are a hair different too. If you look, the DW versus the PDP vent hole, this has a little bit more shape to it versus just a standard round vent hole, which is pretty subtle also, but it is a difference to be noted that the vent holes are a little bit different. But that's visually on the outside the difference. Now let's go ahead, let's flip these upside down, and let's look inside to see some of the differences.
Alright, so we flip these snare drums around so that we can see inside. And right off the bat, you can tell one of the huge difference between the PDP and the DW is because of the snare drum head being used. The snare drum head on the DW is a hazy Remo, but it is a DW snare drum head made by Remo, but it has a haze to it. The PDP is just a generic, clear drum head. No names, no anything, just that. Then if we look at our snare drum wires, we have a DW True Tone 20 strand snare wire, and on this side a nice pretty chrome, no name, generic 20 strand snare drum wire. So the difference between the two is you got the nice True Tone versus just a generic snare drum wire. But they are both 20 strands, so that's nice. If we look inside, that's where we're going to see one of the biggest differences. The PDP is unfinished. There's no finish, there's no stain, there's no anything. The only finish is on the outside. In the DW, they bring this beautiful maple color both outside and in, and they went ahead and finished the inside the same color as they did the out, and it really makes the drum look more complete. So a huge difference between the PDP and the DW is inside got the same stain as the outside, and here they've got nothing. If we look at the snare drum bearing edges, the DW also has a super sharp edge to it, where the DW has more of a contemporary rounded edge. And that's going to make a lot of difference between tones too, you know, between the PDP and the DW, is because the bearing edges have been rounded differently. You got a much sharper aggressive, and this is more of a classic kind of round over bearing edge on the DW. Then if we look on the inside into the hardware, you'll see the PDP uses these more generic screws and washers that have the kind of rainbow color to them. They're definitely a cheaper, you know, combination, and the washers are definitely much bigger. In the DW, they use nice button head screws. They got a crush washer inside, and then the washer itself is the exact same size as the button head, so it looks a lot cleaner inside the DW than it does in the PDP. And then the last difference too is the stampings. This doesn't just have a generic off the line and put an ink stamp on it like the PDP. The only thing you see inside this drum is just this one stamp that tells you when it was made, just a date stamp. And it was just a generic roll-on stamp that someone hit. In the DW drum, it has the actual DW placard inside, the plaque inside. It says DW Performance Series. It also talks that this uses the HVX technology, and then the DW group inside. So it's a lot more finished. It has a nice plaque inside. It's got nicer screws inside. The PDP, all of the prettiness is just on the outside. Everything on the inside and on the bottom is just, it's just generic. And that's one of the biggest differences between the two, is this is finished. This is, I started the project, I never finished the project. So hopefully through this video you learned something about the PDP concept series versus the original DW Performance Series snare drum. If you guys have any questions, or if you think I got any of my information wrong, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll be glad to, you know, answer any questions or change any of my answers that are in there. So thanks for watching. Take care.